This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 50. Wow, that is half a century. Incredible. Anyway, to celebrate this round number, we have a slightly different show today. As I mentioned last week, you may like it, you may not, but it's just to try something new, really. It's a bit like having sex. You know, sex is great and everything, like Rock and Roll English, but sometimes it's just nice to change position and try something new. Anyway, I will stop talking about sex now and let you listen to the show. Happy listening.
Mark the Fart, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm leading the show.
Of course.
Does it feel strange?
Yeah, it does feel strange, actually. Very strange. What about for you?
Oh, it feels perfectly natural.
Good.
How do we start the show?
Well, we normally do a review, I think.
Do you think we have a review?
Well, I know we have a review because I sent it to you about 15 minutes ago.
You're correct. And it's from Arwa 200012. And they say, first of all, I love you and I love your show. I have been addicted to your podcast and I like your friendship. Love you and keep up the good job. We're not friends. People keep making this mistake.
And when she says, I love your podcast, I hope she's talking like the plural you. Well, in fact, singular directed towards me, I hope.
Let's just presume she's talking about both of us. But do you know what the show's about today? I know you do because I've told you what it's about.
Yes, so in answer to your question, I do know what the show's about.
So this episode is about leadership. Great leaders in history, what it means to be a leader, and to settle the eternal debate of who is leading this show, me or you.
That sounds amazing, Dan. But you also used some rock and roll vocabulary there when you said to settle the debate. So to decide the debate is what you wanted to say there. But you're too rock and roll to use simple vocabulary, aren't you, Dan?
Oh, of course.
Exactly.
Of course. So let's get started. According to Forbes magazine, a fairly reputable source, unlike the research that you like to conduct on your on your episodes, there are 5 character traits that every great leader should have. In your eyes, what character traits do you think good leaders should have? And I'm going to check them off.
Okay. You do sound like a sort of TV presenter from the 1980s, though, I must say that. But okay, I will answer your question, Dan. So I obviously have prepared for this because I always prepare. So, number 1, I think the ability...
Hang on, sorry. You prepared for it because you've asked me.
Well, that's the same.
For the information.
So the first one is the ability and the balls. So the courage, or balls, or testicles, whatever you want to say. So the ability...
You want to say testicles, don't you?
Well, yeah. So the ability and the balls to make big decisions. Number 2, I would say you need to be mentally strong, much like I am. Number 3, I would say empathy, because you need to understand your people. And you need to be an example, like I am. And you need to be easily approachable, so someone can talk to you. How many of them were correct?
Well, there's no right or wrong here, Martin. All right, I'm not judging you, but 1.
Oh, good. So in answer to my question, 1 was correct.
1, yeah. According to Forbes magazine.
Yeah.
But, maybe you're right, maybe they're wrong.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, so you got 1 out of 5.
Okay, nice little term there, though, Dan. 1 out of 5. Many people say, 1 from 5. But is that correct English?
No.
No, because we say 1 out of 5. Anyway, what's next?
Essentially, I'm testing you here, by the way.
Sure.
This is to decide who is the better leader. And you've got 1 out of 5
Okay.
on the first one. Okay. So moving on. I did some research on who are the greatest leaders in history, and I stumbled upon a website called Ranker.com.
Okay.
That's Ranker with an R. Okay.
No. Good. very nice rock and roll vocabulary there, Dan, when you said I stumbled upon, which is like I found something by chance. Like I didn't expect to find it. So yeah, you stumbled upon this website.
Yeah, called ranker.com.
Yeah.
And it's a website that crowdsources opinions from people from around the world, and they have compiled a list of the greatest leaders that have ever lived based on the votes that have been taken. So I just wanted to see what your top 5 leaders of all time would be and compare them with what, the people have decided.
Okay. Also, you said rock and roll vocabulary there when you said they have compiled a list. So it's just to say they have made a list, often used with the word list. Collocates well, compile a list. But I also have compiled a list because you told me to do this before. So I would say the best leader in the world is probably my boss, because she's great. And I am only saying this because I know she sometimes listens to the podcast.
Okay,
So,
I'll look for that on the list and see where she comes.
Okay, well, let me know where she comes on the list. Then I've got a couple of serious ones. So Martin Luther King, basically because he's got a great first name. Nelson Mandela, just because he's a great guy. Then I've got Bobby Moore, who most people won't know, but he was captain when England won the World Cup in 1966. Rest in peace, because he is no longer with us, but an absolute gentleman of the beautiful game of football. And the number 5, I've gone for 2 people. Again, this is just...
Well, you can't have 2 people.
Well, they're almost one. They're almost one. Which are Liam and Noel Gallagher, because...
Greatest leaders in world history.
Again, I'm going from my perspective, Dan, because when I was a child, they were the first people that I ever saw that said what they really thought. For example, if a journalist asked them what they thought about a particular band, instead of trying to be nice, they would say what they thought and just say things like, no, I think they're shit. So for that reason,
Is this why you're a prick?
Very possibly. Nice word there, Dan. Quite offensive when he says why you are a prick. It's like a strong, again, offensive way to say you are an idiot. But yeah, maybe.
Very
Dan,
offensive.
Maybe.
Very offensive, yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to compare your 5 with the top 5 from the list.
Okay, well, hopefully I did better this time than on the last quiz.
I'll tell you now, you've got 1 out of 5.
Oh, again, 1 out of 5.
Yeah, it's not your boss. So the first one is George Washington.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know him so well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Thomas Jefferson. A lot of Americans
Yeah,
here.
it's bloody Americans.
Alexander the Great and Martin Luther King.
So Alexander the Great, I mean, I should have really thought of him, because if your name is the Great, I mean, that's a pretty good nickname, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Interestingly, though, on this list, in at number 10 was Donald Trump.
Is this was this made by Donald Trump or some other American idiot?
And let's just to confirm, this means that Donald Trump has been ranked higher in the world's greatest ever leaders than Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Winston Churchill, and unbelievably, at number 35, Jesus Christ.
Did you see where Martin Johnston or Rock and Roll English came on the list?
I think he came about 72, I think.
Oh, not bad.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah.
Still below Jesus Christ. So,
well, I don't want to mess around with Jesus Christ.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so finally, a podcast that you listen to a lot, Entrepreneur on Fire, have listed 7 steps on how to become a better leader on their website. So I thought we could go through each one and give our opinions on each.
Okay, that sounds great, Dan.
Yeah, and this is how we'll decide who is, between me and you, who is the leader of this show.
Okay.
So number 1, follow leaders who you look up to. Do you look up to me?
Before I answer your question, I would just have to explain that rock and roll vocabulary. When you look up to someone, that is when you admire someone. And I definitely, 100% categorically do not look up to you. If anything, I look down on you. So if you look down on someone, it's, well, more or less the opposite, and basically means you think you are better than someone. So yeah, I would say I look down on you.
The key word there is you think.
That's a good point. I personally think I'm better than you, but what do the listeners think?
Okay, we'll come to that at the end of the show.
Okay.
So number 2, practice the things that make you uncomfortable. Do you do this?
Well, there are so many things in life that make me feel uncomfortable.
Human interaction is one of them.
Exactly, because as we mentioned on the last podcast, I very rarely actually have any contact with humans. So that's a really difficult one because, no, I don't really practice them because I generally try and avoid these difficult situations, or awkward situations is another good word, like embarrassing, difficult situations.
This is a really bad sign for your leadership qualities, though. I, on the other hand, do things all the time.
For example?
I went to a group yoga session today.
The thought of you at a yoga session. In fact, on a previous podcast, we discussed when you went to meditation and you started sleeping in the class. So,
fortunately, that didn't happen today.
Oh, good.
Fortunately.
Great.
Number 3, tell yourself every day that you are a leader. I think this is a very important step for you. I've never met anyone who needs to tell themselves more this.
But at what point of the day or where? Like in front of the mirror, in my head? How do I have...
Well, I don't know. In your head, I presume.
Well,
do you tell yourself that you're a leader?
Well, I don't really need to, Dan, because I know I'm a leader, okay? When you have that kind of confidence that I have of leading people, like I'm leading you.
You don't see people.
Yeah, but I'm leading you on Skype, like we're talking now, so that's fine.
Okay, all right. Number 4, learn something new about your expertise, industry, or niche every day.
Oh, well, every day's a lot. But, I often learn new stuff. In fact, when I go home in August, I will be doing a course about how to teach English with technology. I've chosen to do that, Dan. It was a choice between a holiday or a course, and I chose the course. Just out of curiosity, what do you do every day for your expertise? And your expertise at the moment is what? Sitting around unemployed watching Netflix?
I don't watch Netflix. Okay.
Just streaming.
Yeah, exactly. All right, number 5. Gather resources you use and that you would recommend to others. Now, I think this is an interesting one because your life has gone in this direction because of me, because of the books I've told you to read. And you know it.
I very much, disagree with that because I haven't read that many of the books that you have read. Admittedly, you told me to get up early in the morning, so I will give you credit for that.
And to go to the gym in the morning.
Well, they come together, really, don't they? That's
no,
one.
They don't. No,
why would I
don't.
get up early if I'm not going to go to the gym?
Listen, are you going to thank me?
I think probably not, but thanks for the offer.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so do you recommend resources to others or not?
Well, I do, Dan, on my podcasts and
our podcasts.
In the last one, I recommended watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, like to improve your English, and it's funny. I've mentioned other websites where people can learn English. What have you recommended on this podcast?
Not much, actually. Yeah, I mean, I should probably start. Right, number 6 is read.
Okay.
Can you read, Martin?
Yes, I can read, but I must say I didn't actually start reading until I was about 25. So that's only sort of a relatively recent habit that I have learnt.
I actually remember that coming to visit you in Rome, and I almost fell off my chair when I saw a book in the corner of your flat.
A nice piece of vocabulary there, though, Dan, when he said, I nearly fell off my chair. It's a sort of idiom that we used when you say you are really surprised. Yeah, I thought at one point, Dan, I have to make the step from being an English hooligan to a semi-cultured kind of person.
Have you? Are you now semi-cultured?
It's a long process, Dan. It's a long process. But I'm moving in the right direction, and that's all I can do.
Okay. All right. And finally, I think this is a good one for you. Build and grow your relationships.
Well, as I said, I don't really have any human contact with anyone.
Exactly.
So how am I supposed to build and grow these relationships?
Exactly. You're a self-described hermit, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Dan is referencing a video that I made. Again, something else I recommended to the listeners, which I did for work. And remember, hermit is someone that lives alone and doesn't really talk to anyone, which, correct, Dan, is what more or less I am.
Exactly. Okay, well, I've pretty much run out of material now. So
So when he says I've run out of material there, he means I've finished. So great preparation there, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I thought that we could put a poll on Facebook for the listeners to cast their votes on who they think is the better leader.
Okay, but before they do that, there is some rock and roll vocabulary used there, Dan. So a poll is like, well, it's another way to say a vote, basically. And a very nice collocation there when you say to cast their votes. It's basically to make a vote. But we don't say make a vote, we say cast your vote.
Yeah, so we'll have... So people can decide whether it's you, me, or we'll have a third option so people can decide if they love us equally.
That's quite the easy option, though. I think people will probably think, Martin is the leader, but I don't really want to say that. So I'll go for the easy option and say I love them both equally.
Well, the thing is, I know at least 2 people who listen to this show, okay? Dea and Camille. So if I don't get at least 2 votes, I'll be having strong words with them both, okay?
A very nice vocabulary again there, Dan. I will be having strong words for them. It's almost like a polite way to say I will have like a sort of mini argument.
And also, I will assume if I get more votes than you and people think that it is true that I am indeed the leader, I'll take it as a sign that they want to listen to more of me directing this show. So people can now, if they want to hear me again, vote for me.
I'm more than happy for that, Dan. My mission of Rock and Roll English is to help people learn. So if people can learn from this, that is absolutely fine by me, and a lot less work for me, because generally I spend a lot of time writing the website, editing the podcast. So if you want to do all that, Dan, be my guest, which is another way to say go ahead.
Hang on. You can edit this one. I'll let you edit this one.
Okay, great.
And we'll go on from there. Yeah, so... Okay, Mart the Fart.
I think we should actually probably explain that. We forgot to at the beginning of the show. So Mart is obviously short for Martin, and fart is when, let's say, the gas comes out of your stomach and goes, and Mart the Fart is actually a name people like Dan used to call me when we were in primary school and were children. So it's nice to see that nickname is coming back.
Yeah, okay. Are you hoping it stays?
Not massively. It's not the nicest thing to say, but why not?
Anyway, Mart the Fart, you've bored me. I'm going to go. So next time I speak to you, we'll know the results, hopefully.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Yeah, okay. Speak to you later.
All right, see you later. So that was Dan the Man and me speaking about leadership. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, we'll be back to normal next week anyway, so, no problem. But before we look at the rock and roll vocabulary, I would just like to say well done to Dan the Man, as he actually prepared everything alone, and he also edited the main part of the show. So a round of applause for Dan the Man. Now that's the only credit he will ever get from me. And hopefully he won't even hear that because he never listens to the show. So essentially, no credit. Anyway, let's look at some of that rock and roll vocabulary. At the beginning of the show, Dan said we would settle the debate about who is the real leader. So to settle a debate or to even settle an argument would be to decide an argument, decide a debate. He also used a nice term when he said that I got 1 out of 5 on the quiz. That's very important because many people make a mistake with that and say 1 from 5 or something like that. 1 out of 5. Boom. some real rock and roll vocabulary was the phrasal verb stumbled upon, when he said he stumbled upon a website. So that's when you find something by chance, let's say. You can stumble upon a nice shop. You can stumble upon a restaurant. You can even stumble upon a podcast, something I've done many times. Hopefully you've stumbled upon Rock and Roll English today. Another one was when he said he compiled a list. It's just another way to say make a list, but a more rock and roll way to say it. He also used a not so nice word when he said to me, "Is this why you're a prick?" So it's like a very strong, offensive way to say idiot. But obviously between friends, it's fine, as shown in the podcast. Then we had two nice phrasal verbs when Dan mentioned about other people looking up to you. So if you look up to someone, you admire someone. For example, I look up to David Beckham. He is my hero. And the opposite of that was look down on someone. This is actually not so nice because it means you think you're better than someone. Often famous people, for example, will look down on people. And I know I said I look down on Dan, but I actually don't, because that's just not a nice thing to say. Dan the man also used a very nice sort of idiom when he said, "I almost fell off my chair when I saw a book." Just another way, a more poetic way to say I was very surprised. You can use it for anything, really. I almost fell off my chair when I heard Dan the man presenting the show, for example. We had the word hermit, which is someone that lives alone, generally likes to be alone and live in solitude, very much like me. Dan also used a nice term when he said that if he doesn't receive 2 votes in this competition of who is the real leader, he will be having strong words with them. Very nice way to say I will get angry with them. I will tell them, I will have an argument with them. And the last one was when I said at the end to Dan, if he wants to create the podcast and edit the podcast, I said, be my guest. You are welcome. It means like, please. And speaking of that competition about who is the real leader, that was Dan the man's idea, by the way. He mentioned about creating something on Facebook where you can vote. I don't know how to do it, and I don't really want to waste the time doing it. So just leave a comment on the poll on Facebook or Instagram if you want. If not, don't worry about it. And before I go, we have actually run out of reviews now, so we have finished them. So I'm back to asking you every week for a review. And remember what I told you last week about in August there will only be 1 show a week, as I will be on holiday. Well, I won't be on holiday, I'll just be at home. But it's more or less a holiday. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening to episode number 50. If you haven't listened to the old shows, go back and do it. They are evergreen, which means you can always listen to them. Anyway, I'm sure you're bored of me talking now, so I will see you again, or speak to you again, on Monday. Have a good weekend and keep on rocking.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.